The way you shop is changing,
Yeah.
and it's happening incredibly fast.
Yeah.
It's not just about clicking add to cart instead of walking down an aisle anymore.
No, not at all.
Something much more fundamental seems to be reshaping the entire retail landscape, and it puts you, the shopper, kind of firmly in charge.
Absolutely. We're seeing this big transformation from what, we used to call retail, which was really a push model, businesses deciding what to sell you,
Right.
to this more dynamic consumer commerce environment. Now it's definitely a pull model. Consumers, with all the information they have, their expectations, they're dictating the terms now.
And if it felt like things just suddenly, zoomed forward over the last few years, you're right.
Oh, yeah.
Recent events didn't just start these changes, they seem to have drastically accelerated them. Pushing trends forward by maybe 5, even 10 years, some people are saying?
That sounds about right. The future of retail isn't some far-off thing anymore. It's kind of here now.
Which must put immense pressure on businesses.
It does. Huge pressure, but also, it creates some fascinating new opportunities, too.
Okay, let's unpack this. We've been looking into a range of insights and reports, and they paint a pretty clear picture of an industry under siege, really, and going through this rapid evolution.
Mm-hmm.
So today we'll dive into the big forces driving these shifts, what they mean for businesses just trying to survive, and ultimately what it means for you when you decide to buy something.
And we can ground it in some real-world stuff happening right now.
Exactly. We're going to look at how one of the biggest names out there is navigating these exact challenges. But before we jump right in, this deep dive is brought to you by Stonefly.
Right.
If you're looking for secure, ransomware-proof storage solutions, thinking enterprise storage, backup and disaster recovery, AI storage, cloud needs, Stonefly is really a leader in this field.
Very important these days.
Definitely. They offer air-gapped and immutable storage designed to protect your critical data in this, increasingly digital landscape.
Hmm.
To learn more and schedule a demo, just contact sales at stonefly.com.
Good to know.
So let's talk about that fundamental shift then to consumer commerce, that switch from the business push to your pull.
Okay.
How does this new dynamic actually feel from your side as the consumer? What are you demanding now that's forcing companies to completely rethink how they operate?
Well, essentially, you're demanding experiences built entirely around your needs and desires. And there are really maybe 5 core drivers shaping what you expect when you shop today.
Okay, 5 drivers. What's first?
First off, choice. You're pulled to extremes. You either want access to seemingly infinite selection, the kind you basically only get online.
Right, the endless vial.
Exactly. Or you want a highly curated, maybe limited assortment that's focused purely on value, like you'd find at a discounter.
That makes perfect sense. Some days I want to browse 20 different options for one thing. Other days I just want the cheapest one that does the job, and I want to find it fast.
Exactly. And that speed, that ties right into the second driver. Convenience. Time is just so precious, right? And you want seamless experiences. Anytime, anyhow, anywhere. That means easy online ordering, picking up curbside, fast delivery to your door.
And returns.
Oh, crucially, yes. Hassle-free returns if something doesn't work out. Any friction point in that process. You'll likely just go somewhere else next time.
Yeah, the bar has definitely been raised for seamlessness. What's next? Number 3.
Number 3 is value. You are incredibly price savvy today. You're looking for, less for more, getting the most bang for your buck.
Makes sense.
And you're willing to do the research to find it. The numbers are pretty stark here. Something like 81% of customers do online research before buying.
81%. Wow.
Yeah, and of those, almost 90% start with the search engine. Plus, about 75% don't believe high quality requires a high price anymore. They think you can get good stuff without paying top dollar.
That research habit alone fundamentally changes the game, doesn't it? You're walking in or clicking in already armed with information.
It shifts the power dynamic dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
Fourth is purpose. Increasingly, you care about the company behind the product. How so?
How does a retailer behave? What are their values regarding society, the community, the environment? Many consumers, they want to align their purchasing decisions with brands whose purpose resonates with their own values. So it's not just a transaction anymore. It's partly an endorsement of the company itself, like who they are.
Precisely. And finally, number 5, there's this fascinating dance around data and trust.
Privacy.
Right. While many consumers are understandably concerned about privacy, one report said 71%.
That high. Yeah.
A significant number, 66%, are actually willing to share their data if it leads to a genuinely more seamless, more personalized experience. But And this is key, only with a brand they trust.
So convenience and that trusted relationship can kind of overcome some of those privacy worries.
Yeah.
That's a really complex balance retailers have to strike.
It really is.
Okay, so you have these escalating customer demands, choice, convenience, value, purpose, this data trust thing all happening while the general cost of doing business seems to be going up. That sounds like an incredibly challenging environment for retailers.
It's absolutely a pressure cooker. Retail margins have been under pressure for years. I mean, long before the recent economic turbulence.
Right.
Just meeting demands for personalized cross-channel experiences at the lowest possible cost, that created a significant squeeze that simply isn't sustainable with the old ways of operating.
And with costs like labor, shipping, energy all increasing recently, just trimming the fat here and there isn't going to cut it, is it?
Not at all. Retailers are facing really significant cost reduction targets. Think 10–20% for essential retailers, maybe even 20–50% for others.
Whoa.
Yeah. That requires more than just, efficiency tweaks. It requires rethinking the entire operation fundamentally.
So what are the key areas they're focusing on for these deeper, more sustainable cost cuts? What levers can they actually pull?
It's kind of about getting back to basics, but doing it fundamentally differently. Things like optimizing the product assortment, making sure they're selling the right things efficiently. Massively improving supply chain efficiency, that's huge. Boosting workforce productivity, often through technology these days.
Right. Automation and AI.
Exactly. And just broadly reducing operational costs wherever possible across the board.
It sounds like a fundamental restructuring is basically necessary just to stay competitive on price and meet all those demands we talked about.
It really is. And this leads directly to a shifting competitive landscape. The competitors aren't just the usual suspects anymore.
Right. So in this consumer commerce future, who are the players best positioned to succeed? Who's actually built for this new reality?
Well, the field is definitely expanding. Traditional retailers aren't just competing with each other anymore. They're up against companies built on the strength of their data, their tech, their supply chains, who just happen to also sell products or services to consumers.
Interesting.
We're seeing broadly maybe 3 main winning business models emerging from all this.
Okay, tell us about them. What are the 3 models?
First, you have the platform ecosystems. These are often existing tech giants or maybe massive multinational retailers who are transforming themselves into platforms.
Okay.
They win by facilitating interaction and transactions between others, not just selling their own stuff. They might offer multiple services retail, sure, but maybe banking, media, advertising.
Building a whole world around the customer.
Kind of, yeah. And they build a huge market share because of that network effect. Their valuations are often much higher, like 9 times revenue compared to maybe 2–4 times for traditional retailers. They might even sell their platform capabilities to others as a service.
So they become the infrastructure that other businesses might operate on, like the digital mall owner.
Exactly. That's a good way to think about it. Then second, you have the true omnichannel players.
Okay.
These are typically the traditional retailers who are really ruthlessly focused on creating that seamless, customer-centric experience across all their channels, online and physical, making them feel like one thing.
Right, the seamless dream.
Yeah. But the competition here is incredibly intense. To succeed, they need a relentless focus on costs, absolute efficiency, and they often need partnerships for scale, like joining buying groups or things like that.
That makes sense. If you can't be the dominant platform, you have to be absolutely perfect at meeting the customer wherever they are, and you need incredible efficiency just to make money doing it.
Precisely. And then finally, the third group is the smaller niche specialists.
The little guys.
Well, yeah, or maybe category experts, independents. They win by offering something truly unique, maybe deep expertise in one area, highly specialized products, or perhaps a strong local or purpose-led identity.
Okay.
They build a really loyal customer base around that distinct offering, people who seek them out specifically.
So the path forward seems to be either get huge and become a platform, become hyper-efficient and seamless everywhere, or carve out a very specific special niche. It sounds like that traditional middle ground is getting squeezed out pretty hard.
That seems to be the direction things are heading, yes.
And this brings us directly to some recent news involving a giant retailer you definitely know, Walmart. Their recent actions really seem to shine a light on these exact trends and pressures we've just been discussing.
They really do. Walmart recently announced some job cuts, around 1,500 corporate positions across their U.S. teams.
Where were those cuts?
They were in areas like global technology operations, e-commerce, fulfillment management, and Interestingly, advertising as well.
Okay, and the company stated these cuts were about reducing expenses and speeding up decision-making, focusing on priorities and growth.
That was the official line, yes.
Yeah.
Focusing on business priorities and their growth strategy. And they explicitly said it wasn't related to tariffs.
Okay, not tariffs, but
Yeah,
there's speculation, right, about other drivers.
there is. There's pretty strong speculation that AI and automation are significant underlying factors, particularly for those tech-related white-collar roles. There's even an anecdote, circulating about an inventory forecasting team that apparently built tools which might have contributed to making their own roles redundant down the line.
Wow, that's quite a paradox, isn't it? Building the technology that potentially replaces your own job.
It really highlights how quickly AI is moving up the value chain. It's
Yeah.
not just automating purely manual tasks anymore.
Yeah.
And Walmart has also made massive investments in robotics, like a $520 million partnership for systems in hundreds of stores. And they're using AI in supply chain optimization specifically to reduce the need for human oversight.
So while the official reason for the cuts might not be tariffs, that underlying push for cost reduction and efficiency through technology is a direct response to these broader pressures we've been talking about.
Absolutely. It fits right into that picture. And, it's worth noting that while they're cutting some roles, they also plan to add new ones. Yeah, likely focus on these more advanced technologies and strategic growth areas. So it looks like a pretty significant restructuring of their workforce, getting ready for the future.
Okay. Now, shifting slightly, but still related to costs and pressure, Walmart also found itself right in the middle of another major economic force recently, sparking a very public discussion about tariffs.
They did, yeah. Walmart warned that they would likely have to increase prices on certain goods. They stated pretty clearly they simply couldn't absorb the rising costs because of their, quote, narrow retail margins
Mhm.
and the pressure from tariffs. So they'd have to pass that pressure on to customers.
And this kind of went against the narrative, or at least the hope, that foreign exporters would just eat the tariffs, right?
Mm.
That the cost wouldn't hit U.S. consumers.
Exactly. It really helped clarify that the border tax is actually paid by the U.S. importer companies like Walmart.
Okay.
And then naturally, those costs tend to cascade down the supply chain, from the importer to the distributor to the supplier, maybe a contractor, and ultimately it hits the consumer in prices or bids.
Like that example with steel.
Right. Think about galvanized steel. A 25% tariff adds, say, $125 onto a $500 ton. And that extra cost gets billed into everything down the line: manufacturing prices, construction bids, everything.
Didn't the Peterson Institute put a number on this for households?
They did. The Peterson Institute for International Economics estimated this was costing typical U.S. households over $1,200 annually.
Wow. That's significant.
It puts a real number on the impact, yeah. And interestingly, the Treasury Department, after some discussions with Walmart's CEO, even publicly conceded that consumers have been feeling the pain of these tariffs.
That's quite an admission.
It was.
And then there was that very public reaction from Donald Trump, wasn't there?
Yes, there was. He criticized Walmart on social media, essentially telling them and China to eat the tariffs and not pass the costs on to customers, stating he'd be watching.
So presenting a very different viewpoint that businesses should absorb those costs.
Right. A different perspective on who should bear the burden. And then adding another layer of cost pressure on businesses generally. We saw the U.S. credit rating downgraded, partly due to deficits.
Okay, and that leads to?
Well, that typically contributes to rising Treasury yields, which usually means higher borrowing costs for businesses.
Ah, so businesses face not only tariffs potentially increasing the cost of materials they import, but also potentially higher interest rates if they need to borrow money for operations or new projects.
Right. It's sort of a compounding effect on costs throughout the economy. It impacts supply chains, investment decisions, and eventually shows up in prices or project bids for consumers.
So the key takeaway there is that tariffs, regardless of intent, function significantly as a domestic cost driver.
That seems to be the economic reality, yes, not just a foreign policy tool.
Okay, so given this incredibly challenging environment, you've got demanding customers, intense cost pressure, new kinds of competition, these external factors like tariffs and interest rates. What capabilities do retailers actually need to build to succeed in this future?
Well, research points to about 8 critical areas. It includes things like building strategies based on really deep customer insights.
Data again.
Absolutely. Having flexible, digitally enabled technology is crucial. Creating responsive supply chains and operations, and ensuring those seamless interactions we talked about across all channels. That's a big one.
And investing in these isn't just nice to have. right? It's tied to actual results.
Oh, definitely. Companies that invest significantly in these kinds of capabilities are much more likely to exceed customer experience expectations, and they tend to achieve a strong return on investment for those customer-focused initiatives, so it pays off.
So for retailers trying to navigate all this, what are the big strategic questions they absolutely have to answer right now?
They're pretty fundamental questions, really. Like,
Okay.
what do we want to be in this new landscape? Where do we actually want to compete? Which customer segments, which channels, which product areas? And critically, how do we execute and win in those chosen spaces? Answering those questions dictates pretty much everything else, from their technology roadmap to their org structure.
Okay, let's bring it back to Walmart for a second then. How do their recent actions, the layoffs, the big tech investments, their public stance on tariffs, how does that fit into this picture? Are they trying to build the capabilities to become one of those platforms maybe? Or an ultra-efficient omni-channel giant?
That's really the central question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Their heavy focus on technology and automation clearly aligns with building the capabilities needed for either of those winning models, the platform, or the hyper-efficient omni-channel player.
Okay.
But the workforce adjustments and the whole tariff discussion really underscore the intense cost pressures they're under and the difficult decisions required to actually fund that transformation.
So even for a company with their massive scale, it's still a huge challenge.
It seems so. They have the scale, absolutely, but legacy structures, existing ways of doing things, plus these external factors, they all pose significant hurdles to overcome.
And ultimately, why does all of this matter to you, the listener? Why should you care about these big shifts in retail?
Well, whether you're just shopping day to day, or maybe you work in the retail sector, or even in a related industry like logistics or technology, these massive shifts impact you directly.
How so?
They influence the prices you pay, clearly. They affect the types of jobs available in the economy. And they shape the overall health of the economy around you. Understanding these forces just helps you make sense of the changes you're seeing every single day.
It's definitely a dynamic and, well, sometimes turbulent time to be a part of and a consumer within this whole evolving landscape.
Indeed. And the story is definitely far from over.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we've explored how retail is rapidly transforming into this idea of consumer commerce, really driven by your demands and these immense cost pressures.
Right. New business models are emerging platforms, omnichannel experts, niche specialists.
And we've seen how major players like Walmart are wrestling with some really difficult choices, trying to balance automation, efficiency, and these big external forces like tariffs.
It's a really complex picture, isn't it, involving technology, economics, and the increasing power of you, the individual consumer.
And that leaves us with a key question to maybe ponder. As AI and automation continue to reshape companies like Walmart, and as complex factors like tariffs keep influencing pricing, will the future of consumer commerce ultimately lead to unparalleled convenience and value for you?
Hmm.
Or will the costs, both the financial ones that eventually get passed along and maybe the human ones felt within these businesses, will those costs actually be higher and maybe more hidden than they appear today?
That's definitely something to consider as you navigate your own shopping experiences going forward.
Well, this deep dive into the future of retail and its challenges has been supported by Stonefly. They're a leader in enterprise storage, backup and disaster recovery, AI storage, and cloud solutions. They provide secure, ransomware-proof storage, including those air-gapped and immutable options we mentioned. Really crucial for protecting critical data in today's rapidly evolving digital environment.
Absolutely vital.
To explore how Stonefly can help protect your business, you can contact sales@stonefly.com to schedule a demo.